Zara sat beneath a large, sun-withered baobab tree along a dusty street in the outskirts of New Orleans. Her lips trembled as she clutched a worn-out black food container, trying to hold back tears. Her clothes were faded, threadbare, and clung loosely to her thin frame. Her belly ached, but she wasn't crying for herself. Her little brother Elijah hadn't eaten either. He hadn't eaten since the day before. Elijah was just 9, and ever since the accident that claimed their parents' lives, he could no longer walk properly. He moved around with a pair of makeshift wooden crutches carved by their late uncle. Zara looked up at the pale blue sky, her throat tight, her strength nearly gone. She held the warm food close to her chest and whispered, "God, I don't know what to do anymore. Elijah's in pain. Please help us." Just then, a frail voice broke her silence. "My daughter, please, help me." Zara looked up, startled. In front of her stood an old black woman with sunken cheeks and deep lines across her weather-worn face. Her tattered scarf barely covered her graying hair. Her clothes were frayed at the edges, and she wore one broken slipper on her swollen foot. She carried nothing. Her eyes, though dim, held a quiet plea. She pointed gently to the food container in Zara's arms. "I haven't eaten since yesterday. Please, can you spare some food?" Zara hesitated. Her arms tightened around the container. "I'm sorry," she replied softly, her voice trembling. "It's for my brother. He's sick. He didn't eat yesterday either." The woman nodded slowly, said nothing, and quietly walked to a nearby stone. She lowered herself carefully, placing one hand on her chest like she was in pain. "My child," she murmured, "even one bite would help me live through the night." Zara looked at her again. The woman's cracked lips trembled. Her hands were shaking. Her feet were blistered and caked in dust. She didn't beg. She just sat there, still, quiet and waiting. Zara's throat went dry. Her heart beat heavy. She looked down at the container in her hands. Elijah hadn't eaten. But this woman, she might not even survive the night. Zara closed her eyes, held her breath, and made her decision. She stood, knelt beside the old woman, untied the bag, and pulled out the small plate inside. "Here," she whispered. "It's not much, but please eat." The woman looked up slowly, shocked. Tears welled in her eyes. "God bless you, my daughter," she said, her voice shaking. She took the plate with reverence as if it were gold. Zara didn't speak again. But deep in her heart something stirred, a feeling she couldn't explain. She had no idea this one moment would change everything. When Zara returned home, she pushed open the creaky wooden door of their small rented room. The air was still. Elijah sat by the window staring outside like he always did. The second he saw her, his face brightened. "Zara," he called out, his voice hopeful. "Did you bring food?" Zara stood by the door and hesitated. Then she nodded slowly. "I did, but I gave it to someone else." Elijah's smile faded. "But I'm hungry," he said weakly. "So hungry." Zara walked over quickly and knelt beside him. She wrapped her arms around his tiny shoulders. "I know, Elijah. I know," she said softly, her eyes filling with tears. "I didn't want to." But she was so weak, so tired. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. I couldn't ignore her. Elijah leaned his head against her shoulder, his voice low. "Will we ever be okay, Zara?" Zara didn't answer. She held him tighter, instead, trying not to cry louder than the silence. Later that morning, with her belly still empty, Zara walked to her job at a construction site. Her job was hard, fetching water, filling large drums, scrubbing surfaces, lifting sacks of sand. It was work many refused to do, but she had no choice. The sun blazed overhead. The ground cracked with dryness. With every trip to the water barrel, her arms burned, her legs shook. She tried to smile at her coworkers, but her lips were dry and pale. Hunger clawed at her insides. By noon, her body had had enough. She dropped the heavy bucket by a wheelbarrow and staggered to a nearby neem tree for shade. She sank down onto the dusty ground and leaned against the bark, eyes fluttering. "I just need a moment," she whispered, but that moment stretched into more. Her eyes closed. Not long after, the supervisor, Mr. Bryant, a loud, sharp-faced man in dark shades and a stiff-collared shirt, walked across the yard. He scanned the site. Workers mixed cement and carried bricks. But he didn't see Zara. "Where's that girl?" he barked. A worker pointed at the tree. Mr. Bryant stormed over. "Sleeping while others are working?" he shouted. Zara jerked awake, startled. She scrambled to her feet. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, struggling to breathe. "I didn't mean to. I was tired." "Tired?" Mr. Bryant scoffed. "Did I hire you to nap?" Zara looked down. Her legs wobbled, her fingers curled at her sides. "You're lazy," he spat. "Get out, leave now. You won't get paid a dime, not even 1 cent. Zara's lips parted in shock. "Please, sir," she said, kneeling on the dry ground. "Please, I need this job. My brother—" "I said leave." Mr. Bryant turned his back and walked off without another word. Zara sat there, stunned, heartbroken. Then slowly she rose to her feet and walked away. Her legs were heavy, her eyes blurred with tears. By the time she reached their room, she could barely stand. Elijah was still sitting by the window. When he saw her face, his heart sank. "Zara, what happened?" She dropped to the floor and covered her face. "I lost the job," she whispered. Elijah pulled himself to her and placed a small hand on hers. "What'll we do now?" Zara couldn't answer. They sat in silence. Then Elijah looked up at the ceiling and said in a soft, cracking voice, "Mom, Dad, we're suffering." Tears poured down Zara's cheeks. She closed her eyes, held her brother close, and in her heart, whispered the same prayer. That night, the room was hot. A single bulb flickered on the wall. Elijah had fallen asleep, arms wrapped around a worn cushion. Zara sat on the floor, her back against the wall, staring at the leaky zinc roof. A drop of water fell from a corner. She leaned forward and tucked a wrapper over Elijah's legs. Then, placing a hand on his chest, she whispered, "God, I don't know what else to do. He needs food. He needs a doctor. I'm lost. Please, show me the way." She closed her eyes and prayed. Sleep found her quietly. She didn't know that tomorrow would bring something she never imagined. The next morning, the sky was a soft gray, and the city streets smelled of dust and diesel. Zara walked slowly through a more developed part of the city, her shoes barely holding together, her feet aching. She had spent the whole morning walking from one gate to another, asking for work. Nobody wanted her. Her stomach grumbled. Her hands trembled from hunger. But her eyes stayed sharp, watching every wall, every sign, every gate. Then she saw it. A large, cream-colored house stood across the road, its fence lined with hibiscus flowers. A small wooden board was nailed beside the gate. "Housekeeper needed urgently. Apply in person." Zara's heart skipped a beat. She stood still for a moment, then looked up at the sky. "Please, God. Please let this be the one." She crossed the road, her hands shaking. As she reached the gate, she paused. Should I knock? What if they slam the door in my face? She touched the iron bars gently, then took a deep breath and knocked twice. A few seconds later, she heard slow footsteps from the other side. The gate creaked open. A tall security guard in a faded brown uniform looked her over. His eyes went from her headscarf down to her dusty shoes. "Yes? What do you want?" he asked. Zara swallowed hard. "I saw the sign. I'm here for the housekeeper job." The guard raised an eyebrow. "You came for this job?" "Yes, sir," she nodded quickly. He glanced over his shoulder, then back at her. "The boss is not around right now, but you can come back tomorrow morning. He'll want to see you himself." Zara's shoulders dropped slightly. "Please, sir, can I wait? Just until he returns?" The guard shook his head. No need. He doesn't like strangers waiting outside. Just come early, before 8 a.m. Zara nodded slowly. Thank you, sir. I'll be here. She turned and walked away, her steps tired, but her chest quietly rising, with hope. As she moved down the road, she whispered under her breath, God, don't let me miss this chance. But just ahead, something made her stop. A familiar figure was walking slowly, hunched over under the weight of a large burlap sack. It was the same old woman, the one Zara had given food to, the one with cracked lips, sad eyes, and broken slippers. Zara gasped. Mama! The old woman turned, breathing heavily. You again, she said with a small smile. Ah, my daughter, may the heavens bless you. Zara rushed to her side. Let me help you, Mama. This sack is too heavy. The old woman nodded, her arms shaking. You're truly a child of light. May your life overflow with joy. Zara lifted the sack. It was heavier than she expected. Her arms strained, but she didn't let go. As they walked together, the old woman asked, How's your little brother? Zara looked down. Still the same. The woman nodded slowly. You helped me when you had nothing. Heaven saw it. Good will come to you. Zara smiled softly but said nothing. Then the old woman stopped, touched her own chest and said, My name is Clara, but you can call me Mama C. Zara's face lit up. Mama C? That's beautiful. I like it. Mama C chuckled gently. And you, my child? What's your name? My name is Zara, she replied with pride. They walked in silence for a while, one step at a time, a stranger and a girl bound by kindness. The next morning, before the sun rose high, Zara was up. She fetched water, bathed quickly, and wore her cleanest dress, a pale yellow one with a tiny tear at the sleeve. She combed her hair neatly and tied it with a purple scarf. Before leaving, she leaned over Elijah, who was still sleeping, and kissed his forehead. Pray for me, she whispered. Then she stepped outside and began the walk back to the house with the sign. When she arrived at the gate, the same security guard saw her and smiled faintly. You came early, he said, unlocking the gate. Yes, sir. Thank you so much, she replied. He led her inside the compound. It was big, peaceful. In the middle sat a man, tall, clean-shaven, dressed in a white shirt, sipping from a ceramic mug. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. He looked up. You're here for the housekeeper job? Yes, sir, Zara replied, standing straight. He put down his cup and leaned forward slightly. I'm Mr. Langston. I own this house. You may sit. Zara sat on the edge of the chair across from him. Can you clean properly? Every part of the house? He asked. Yes, sir. She nodded quickly. Mr. Langston studied her quietly, then said, This isn't a live-in position. You come early, clean everything, wash clothes, sweep, mop, whatever is needed. Then go home before sunset, understand? Zara nodded again. Yes, sir, that's fine. He paused, then smiled gently. You're hired. Zara's mouth fell slightly open. Sir? Really? Yes, Mr. Langston said. You look honest. I believe in honest people. Zara covered her mouth with one hand, tears welling in her eyes. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Mr. Langston waved his hand casually. Start tomorrow. Zara stood, bowed slightly, and walked out of the compound, her steps lighter than air. She didn't just walk. She ran. Her slippers slapped the dusty ground as joy pulsed through her chest. She reached their tiny room, flung the door open, and shouted, Elijah! Her brother looked up, startled. What happened? Zara dropped to her knees beside him. I got it, Eli. I got the job. His eyes widened with disbelief. You did? She laughed, tears slipping down her cheeks. I really did. I got the housekeeper job. Elijah threw his arms around her. You did it, Zara. You really did it. She held him close and whispered, Now we can start saving. For your surgery. Elijah nodded slowly. I believe again. Days passed. Each morning before the sun reached the rooftops, Zara arrived at Mr. Langston's home. The compound always smelled of fresh dew and hibiscus, and the security guard would greet her with a nod. Inside, Zara worked quietly and diligently. She swept the floors until they gleamed, washed Mr. Langston's clothes with care, dusted every windowsill and corner, and cleaned the furniture like it belonged to her own mother. She didn't complain. She didn't cut corners. She didn't ask for favors. She just worked, with quiet grace and unwavering heart. Sometimes Mr. Langston would sit on the porch reading the newspaper or sipping tea. He often watched her when she wasn't looking. The way she moved, steady, precise, the way she respected the space, never wasting a moment. He noticed how she rarely spoke unless spoken to, how she carried dignity like a second skin. One afternoon, as Zara was rinsing off the tiled porch, Mr. Langston looked up from his newspaper and called softly, "Zara." She turned quickly. "Yes, sir?" He stood and walked closer. "You're very quiet," he said, eyes studying her. "And you work with your whole heart, I notice that." Zara smiled shyly. "Thank you, sir. Keep it up," he said with a nod. "I will, sir," she replied. But something unspoken lingered in the air. Mr. Langston didn't know what it was, yet. A thought, a warmth, something new beginning to bloom inside him. Later that week, he returned home late from work. The sky had turned a warm amber, and his shoulders sagged with exhaustion. He stepped into his living room and stopped short. On the table was a hot plate of yam and spinach stew, fresh and fragrant. A folded napkin rested beside it. On the napkin was a small handwritten note. "Good evening, sir. I thought you might be tired and hungry. I hope this helps." Zara, Mr. Langston stared at the plate, then at the note. He didn't move. His eyes softened. He hadn't asked her to cook. That wasn't part of her job, and yet here it was. He sat down slowly, not to eat, but just to take it in. "No one has done something like this for me since my cook traveled," he said quietly to himself. He looked around. The kitchen was clean, the dishes washed, the air calm. He picked up the note again and read it twice. "Zara," he whispered. "Who are you? Really?" The next morning, Mr. Langston sat in his room, phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking to his mother. "Mama, you know I want you to stay here with me," he said, his tone gentle but weary. His mother's voice came through clear and full of wisdom. "I know, my son, but I won't stay in that big house with you. I have my reasons." He sighed. "You barely visit, Mama. I miss you." "I miss you too, but that place is too quiet for an old woman like me." Then her voice shifted. Serious, focused. "But Samson, what about your future? You're not getting any younger." "Mama, please not this again. I'm just saying, you don't even have a fiancé. Look around, your friends are married, raising families, and you, still alone." Mr. Langston said nothing. "I'm not saying marry tomorrow," she continued, "but at least have someone by your side. Someone with a good heart. In fact, I've been watching someone. She's different, she's special. I'll arrange for you two to meet." He rubbed his forehead. "Please don't set me up again." "This time, just trust me," she said gently. He stayed quiet for a moment. "All right, Mama. I'll listen." They spoke a while longer, then ended the call. That night he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking not about the woman his mother had in mind, but about Zara. The way she moved, the way she never looked for pity, the warmth in her silence, the strength in her gentleness. He didn't know yet that fate was already weaving something extraordinary. A few days later, the wind carried a gentle calm across the neighborhood. Zara was in the living room, carefully dusting the furniture like she did every morning. Every stroke was smooth, deliberate. She wanted everything to sparkle. Mr. Langston's mother was coming to stay for a few days. Suddenly, the front door creaked. Zara glanced toward it just in time to see Mr. Langston rise from his study chair. He walked over and pulled open the door with a warm smile. "Mom," he said with joy in his voice, wrapping his arms around the woman at the door. Zara's hands froze mid-motion. Her heart stopped, her breath caught in her throat. She turned her head slowly to get a proper look, and the moment her eyes met the woman's face, she dropped the cleaning cloth from her hand. There she stood, a small black handbag clutched in one hand, her face lit with the smile of a mother. It was Mama C. Zara's voice cracked, barely audible. "Mama C." Mama C's smile faltered. Her eyes widened as she stared at Zara. "Zara?" she whispered. They stood motionless. Mr. Langston looked between them, his brows furrowing. "Wait, you two know each other?" Zara lowered her head and nodded slowly. Her hands were trembling. Mama C said nothing at first. Her eyes scanned the room, then fell back on Zara. She stepped inside gently, removed her shoes, and sat down on the edge of the sofa. Mr. Langston's voice cut the silence, now edged with confusion. "What's going on here?" Mama C placed a hand over her heart. "Let's all sit down." The three of them moved to the living room. Mr. Langston folded his arms. Zara sat like a shadow, her shoulders tense. Mama C looked at her son and began, softly, "Samson, there's something I didn't tell you. I did something behind your back, but I had a reason." His eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Mama C's voice remained steady. "A few weeks ago I left this house in disguise. I dressed like a poor old woman and walked the streets." Samson blinked. "Why would you do that?" She looked at Zara, then back at him. "I wanted to test the hearts of young women. I didn't want someone who looked good on paper. I wanted someone with a good soul." She turned to Zara again, her eyes misting. She didn't know who I was. She didn't help me for money. She didn't even ask my name. She just gave me her only food when she had nothing for herself. She helped me carry a load heavier than she could bear, and even then, she told me about her brother, how he's crippled, how she dreams of saving money for his surgery. Zara wiped quiet tears from her cheek. She couldn't speak. Mama C smiled with pride. "She's not just kind, she's rare. The kind of woman a man should never take for granted." The room fell silent again. Mr. Langston sat still, staring at the floor, his jaw clenched. Then, after a long pause, he stood up and walked quietly to his room. The door closed behind him without a sound. Inside his room, Samson walked to the window and stared outside. He saw the sky stretch out above, the rooftops wide and endless. His thoughts were louder than words. He remembered how Zara cleaned the house every morning, how she cooked for him without being asked, how she moved like someone who carried the world on her back, yet never dropped a smile. He didn't speak, but his heart whispered. She wasn't just doing her job, she was just being Zara. In the living room, Mama C gently touched Zara's shoulder. "My dear, wipe your tears. Good hearts don't go unnoticed forever." Zara nodded slowly, though her heart still trembled. Then she looked up at the clock on the wall. Her eyes widened. "I need to go, Mama. Elijah hasn't eaten yet. His leg was hurting this morning." Mama C stood quickly. "Wait. Stay a bit longer." "I want to, but I can't. He's waiting for me." Mama C gave her a long, emotional look. "You're a strong girl. Your brother's lucky to have you." Zara smiled faintly. "He's all I've got, Mama." She turned toward the door. Mama C followed her and placed a hand gently on her back. "Please be careful. And greet him for me." Zara nodded, then stepped out of the house and into the fading sunlight. Mama C stood at the doorway, watching her go, her eyes full of tears. "That girl?" she whispered to herself, holding her chest. "God brought her here for a reason." That night, the house was quiet. The lights were dim, and a soft wind rustled the curtains. Mama C walked slowly down the hallway, her slippers making soft sounds on the floor. She paused outside her son's room, then knocked gently. "Come in." Samson's voice answered. She opened the door and found him sitting on the edge of the bed, holding a closed book in his lap. "Mama," he said with a sigh. "Are you okay?" She sat beside him and placed her hand on his. "I should be asking you that." He didn't reply right away. His face was calm, but his eyes held a storm. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "For what?" he asked. "For not telling you earlier about what I was doing. About the test. I just wanted to find someone for you, but not just anyone. I wanted a woman with a heart you could build a life with." Samson leaned back and placed the book on the nightstand. "Mama, I think I already knew." Mama C blinked. "Knew what?" He looked at her, his voice steady. "That Zara is the one." Her eyes widened. "You mean?" "I've been watching her too. Long before I knew anything. About your test, there's something about her, she doesn't fake it. She doesn't try to impress anyone, she just does what's right. Even when no one's watching, even when she's tired." Mama C nodded slowly, her chest rising with emotion. Samson looked away. "I care about her deeply, Mama. I think I'm falling for her." Mama C jumped up with a big smile and clapped her hands. "Then follow your heart, my son. Don't waste time." Samson smiled softly, but a shadow of doubt lingered in his eyes. What if she says no? Mama C sat back down and held his hand again. Zara is not the type to give herself easily to just anyone. But if she's given you even a small place in her heart, you're already in deeper than you think. She just doesn't know it yet. The next morning, the sun had barely climbed the sky. Samson stood outside the gate of his home, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the road. He hadn't slept much. His thoughts had wandered all night. Scenes of Zara's laughter, her soft voice, the quiet strength in her spirit. And now he waited, heart beating slower but harder. Then he saw her. Zara was walking slowly toward the gate, her scarf neatly tied, a small nylon bag clutched in her hand. Her steps were gentle, but her presence lit the morning. Samson smiled, silently. That's her, he thought. That's the woman I want. Not because of how she looks, but because of her heart. Zara reached the gate and greeted him warmly. Good morning, sir. Good morning, Zara, he replied. She didn't know he'd been waiting just for her. She didn't know this morning was the beginning of something new. She walked past and headed inside to start her work. As always, she went to greet Mama C. Good morning, Mama, she said, bowing her head. Mama C smiled and touched her shoulder. Good morning, my daughter. How's Elijah? He's fine, Mama. Thank you, Zara replied softly. May God bless you, Mama C whispered. Zara smiled and went on with her tasks. Later that morning, after finishing her work, Zara turned to leave. Just as she reached for the doorknob, she heard a voice. Zara, Mr. Langston called. She turned quickly. Sir? Please, come. She walked toward him, noticing something different in his face. He wasn't his usual composed self. His smile was gentle but quiet, thoughtful. He stood up, took a deep breath, and looked her directly in the eyes. There's something I want to tell you. Zara's heart fluttered. She nodded, unsure. He stepped closer. Zara, I want to marry you. The room fell into silence. Her breath stopped. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She looked down, then back up. Her hands trembled slightly. I'm not saying no, she said softly. But I need time to think. Samson nodded with respect. Take your time. I'll be waiting. She gave a small nod, picked up her bag, and walked out of the house. But her mind was spinning. Is this real? She whispered to herself. Can this really be true? That day, Zara didn't walk straight home. She wandered, thinking, feeling, questioning. A storm had started in her heart, but it didn't feel like danger. It felt like the start of something powerful. Zara didn't give her answer right away. She needed time. Real time. Not because she doubted his words, but because she didn't want to mistake gratitude for love. She needed to know if what she felt for Mr. Langston came from her heart or from the weight of her struggles. So she watched. Every day she arrived at the house early, finished her work, and quietly observed him. One morning, she sat on the wooden bench near the backyard, tying her scarf tighter against the breeze. From there, she had a clear view of the front gate. Mr. Langston walked outside, talking to the gatekeeper. "The plumber called, sir," the gatekeeper said, worried. "He said he won't make it today. Too much traffic." Mr. Langston sighed and looked at his watch. "Call him again. If he can't come, we'll find someone else. This isn't the first time." His voice wasn't angry, just firm, calm, fair. He didn't insult anyone, didn't yell. He simply acted like someone in charge who didn't need to raise his voice to be respected. Zara nodded to herself quietly from the bench. Later that week, 2 of Mr. Langston's employees came to drop off some files. One of them, young and nervous, was visibly shaking as he entered. "You're late," Mr. Langston said, accepting the folder. "I'm sorry, sir." "There was traffic," the young man stammered. He looked down, expecting a scolding. Mr. Langston gave a short nod. "It's your first time. I'll let it go. But next time, call ahead." "Yes, sir." Mr. Langston placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "You're doing okay. Just take your time more seriously." Zara watched the whole exchange from the kitchen doorway. He was not soft, but he was kind. He corrected, but never humiliated. He had power, but used it with grace. She started to see him differently, not just as a boss, but as a man. And then there was how he treated his mother. Mama C never had to ask twice for anything. He sat with her many evenings, listening to her stories about the village, about life back in the day. He didn't roll his eyes or check his phone. He just listened, laughed softly, asked questions. Zara would smile from the kitchen. Every moment made her feel safer, more seen, more valued. At night, she'd lie next to Elijah, thinking in silence. One evening, she whispered to herself, "If I say yes, I think I'll be saying yes to a good man." A week passed. Zara walked into the house wearing a long yellow dress. Her hair was done, her face glowing with soft beauty. Mama C was in the kitchen humming. Mr. Langston was in the living room reviewing a file. Zara stepped in slowly and cleared her throat. "Good morning, sir." He looked up, surprised, but smiled. "Zara, good morning." She walked toward him, steady and calm. "I've been thinking," she said. He put down the file, eyes focused. "I've thought about everything, your words, your actions, your heart, and now I'm sure." She smiled gently and said with full clarity, "I will marry you." Mr. Langston stood up immediately. His eyes widened. His joy was sudden, deep, and sincere. He moved forward and wrapped his arms around her. Not too tight, just enough to let her feel the truth in his heart. "Thank you, Zara," he whispered. "Thank you." Just then, Mama C peeked out from the kitchen. "What's going on?" she asked with a sly smile. Zara turned to her with a shy grin. "Mama." I said yes. Mama C dropped the spoon she was holding and shouted, "Hallelujah! Thank you, Lord." She began to dance across the sitting room, singing, clapping her hands. "My son has found a wife, a good wife." Zara and Mr. Langston laughed together. And in that moment, surrounded by joy, Zara knew this wasn't a fairy tale. It was her real life. And it was finally turning into something beautiful. Zara sat beside Mr. Langston in the living room, her fingers gently scrolling on her old phone. She looked up, her cheeks glowing. Samson," she said shyly. "I've been thinking. I want to go back to school." Samson's eyebrows lifted. "Really?" She nodded. "Yes. But not on campus. I want to study online, that way I can keep working and helping out." Samson smiled instantly. "Say no more." He wasted no time. That same week, he enrolled her in one of the top online universities in the country. He paid the full tuition in one sitting and even bought her a brand new laptop, a study desk, and a quiet corner in the house just for her learning. But he didn't stop there. He remembered the way Zara's face lit up every time she cooked. The calm joy in her eyes when she stirred a pot. The pride she carried when others complimented her food. So he made a secret plan. One Saturday morning, he told her, "Come with me. There's somewhere I want to show you." They got into the car and drove through the city streets. Zara looked out the window, puzzled. When they finally stopped, they stood in front of a newly painted building with bright red and cream colors. "What are we doing here?" she asked, confused. Samson handed her a key. "This is your shop," he said with a smile. "You're now the owner of your own catering business." Zara's eyes widened. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked up at the sign above the shop. Zara's Delight Kitchen. Her hands flew to her face. She gasped. "Samson, why would you do all this?" He looked at her with full sincerity. "Because you deserve it. I know you. You're not someone who just wants to sit and be pampered. You want to work. You want to grow. And I love that about you." Zara hugged him tight. Her heart swelled. For once in her life, she wasn't crying from pain, but from overwhelming joy. But the greatest gift hadn't come yet. One quiet morning, Zara was sitting in the compound watering the plants when a man in a white coat walked in. He was a doctor, a gentle, smiling man. He walked up and said, "Good news. We've secured the medical support we needed. Elijah can finally have the surgery." Zara dropped the watering can. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice trembling. The doctor nodded. "Everything's been paid for. By your fiancé." Zara turned. Samson was standing by the doorway, hands in his pockets, his smile calm and warm. She ran to him and wrapped her arms around him again. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." Weeks later, Elijah went in for surgery. The family waited outside the hospital, hands clenched, prayers flowing in silence. And then the moment came. Elijah stepped out, slowly, walking. Really walking. No crutches. No cane. Zara fell to her knees and wept. Her baby brother was whole again. The pain, the waiting, the hunger, it had all led to this. Months passed. Then came the wedding. Zara wore a flowing white dress, radiant like morning sunshine. Her smile lit up the hall. Samson stood tall beside her, proud and joyful. Family and friends filled the venue, dressed in bright traditional African colors. Mama C danced and danced until her knees gave out. There was food. There was music. There was laughter that seemed to echo forever. Zara glanced at Elijah. He was dancing now, walking freely, laughing like he never had before. She turned to Samson, took his hand and said quietly, "God gave me a new life." And as they stood side by side with everyone around them smiling and clapping, Zara knew her days of sorrow were gone. She had found love, peace, and purpose. And this time, it was forever. The music faded into a slow rhythm as the evening sun dipped behind the skyline. The wedding was still in full swing. Guests were laughing, eating, and dancing in waves of joy. Zara stood quietly for a moment at the edge of the dance floor, watching Elijah move with ease among the crowd. He was walking, not just walking, but dancing, spinning around in circles with a grin so wide it reached his ears. She placed her hand over her heart, overwhelmed. Her brother, once bound by wooden crutches and pain, now free. Samson walked over and gently wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "You okay?" he asked. Zara nodded slowly, her voice soft. "I'm more than okay. I'm living the kind of life I once only prayed for." They turned to look at Mama C, who was now leading a circle of aunties in a joyful dance, her head wrap bouncing with every step. She caught Zara's eye and gave her a wink. then kept dancing like the world depended on it. Zara smiled. She leaned closer to Samson and whispered, "You gave me more than love. You gave me hope, a future, a voice." Samson held her hand. "And you gave me peace, Zara. You gave me something I didn't even know I was missing." As the night wore on, Zara and Samson sat quietly beneath a canopy of fairy lights. The crowd buzzed around them, but in that moment, everything slowed down. "I want to do more," Zara said, her eyes thoughtful. "I want to use our catering business to help girls like me, girls who are struggling but have fire in them. I want to teach them, feed them, give them what I never had growing up." Samson looked at her like she'd just spoken his own dream. "Then that's exactly what we'll do," he said. Later that week, they launched a new initiative from Zara's Delight Kitchen, free training sessions for underprivileged women in their community. Mama C helped with the planning. Elijah even helped with delivery. It wasn't just a business, it became a movement. And then came the message at the end of it all. A truth bigger than any one wedding. A lesson carried on every plate Zara served, every young girl she mentored, every child she smiled at in the Maid street. Sometimes a small act of kindness, a shared plate of food, a hand beneath a heavy load, can open a door you never imagined. Because kindness isn't just a choice. It's a seed. And when planted in the right heart, it grows into a life that touches generations. So never stop doing good even when no one is watching.